Welcome to the Idea Land podcast, hosted by Ravi Komatireddy. Charles Juni Schoenherr is an actor and voiceover talent living in Chicago. From broadcasting, dog washing, hosting dolphin shows, teaching American dialects to performers in Australia, house painting, to working on a cruise ship, Charles has found an aspect of each experience to choose the third path.
Thanks for having me.
If we had to map back our high school paths, probably even from junior high, I would say you took one that is the most opposite. It's a path that I just never even delved into, but for some crazy reason, I want to now. And I just want to hear the story. I mean, I want to hear, just give us some of your background. Tell everyone where you're from, where'd you grow up, kind of the basics.
Absolutely. I come from a relatively small family. There's just the four of us. Started out in the Quad Cities in the late 70s, early 80s. And then through job changes with my father, we ended up moving quite a bit. We ended up on the East Coast, and then we came back to the Midwest. But this time we were in a very small town in central Illinois. And while we were in that small town, I did not fit in. It was a small town, and it's a lovely town, great people, but it wasn't for me. And the things that I was interested in and liked and wanted to do with my life just really did not fit in. I mean, this town, you've got to drive almost an hour to get to the nearest shopping mall. Not that that's a paragon of culture or anything, but I mean, as far as like anything like, regular live theater, getting things like periodicals, comic books. I mean, sure, the local grocery store had the spinner rack with the comic books that were replaced like maybe once a month, if that. But anyway, I knew that I was kind of made for being in a bigger city, having some more options for things. A couple things happened. One is that I discovered theater and wanted to act and perform. And the local community theater was very, very influential in that and allowed me to explore that. But I also, I think we just moved there and I was about age 12, and we had a radio station in town. And I marched my precocious little ass over to that radio station. I think I was either 12 or 14. I think I was probably closer to 12. And I walked up to the front desk and I asked for an application.
Are you serious?
Filled it out. Oh yeah, I filled it out, and I ended up running it back over there. And I can remember Linda. She managed the office at the radio station.
Well, what would you got to say the station name now?
Okay, well, it's no longer existing in its original format, but this is Light Hits and Soft Favorites, WPOK WJEZ.
What did you ask for? Like, what did you expect was going to happen?
Oh, I don't know. I thought I was going to be like, the scrappy young cub reporter kid who ends up, like in the movies in the 40s, there's the kind of like the Jimmy Olsen, at the Daily Planet. I thought, not that I was into broadcast or news or anything like that, but I thought, they're going to take me under their wing. They're going to find this scrappy young guy, and they're going to say, "Let me show you the wonders of broadcasting." Oddly enough, something sort of like that happened because a few years later, when I was 15, I ended up being called in to do something at the radio station. Now, as I mentioned, it was a good hour's drive to the nearest place of any kind of metropolitan description, and that meant that it was about an hour drive to the nearest college, university. And normally radio stations will hire interns as unpaid labor to kind of do all the go-to work,
right? And
then in turn get college credits. Well, you can't really do that in a small town like this, so they hired high school students. And they used to stagger it so that each year they would hire a freshman. And so then you had 4 people who each would, train the younger person. It was this kind of self-perpetuating thing. Well, by the time I was starting in high school, my freshman year, they had 3 seniors. And they were all going to be gone. And so they needed to train somebody, and they wanted someone on the younger end. And they said, "Hey, didn't that Schoenherr kid, didn't Tyler and Sue's boy come in here a few years back?" And so they called me in to do what they have. And I don't think anybody who lives in an area that isn't small town, particularly Midwest, will understand this. But all the local school district closings, when there's a snow
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
the local media will broadcast that. Well, another thing they did in our particularly small area was they would read off in the morning radio program what the lunch was going to be at all the area public schools.
Do you still remember that? You remember that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And so if you wanted to know whether you should, make a bologna sandwich or have mom pack you something, or you should, go and pay for the hot lunch, you say, oh, it's pizza day. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have a pizza. So anyway, what they would do is they would hire radio children to come into the radio station, area kids and teens, to come in and read the school lunches for the whole county, which it doesn't sound like much, but there's a fair number of them. And you're not only just reading the lunches for that day, you're reading the whole week's worth.
So you're 15.
Yeah.
And so you're walking into basically what is the biggest broadcast professional setup you've ever seen.
Correct.
At that point. Did anyone ever even train you or teach you how to use it? Or said, hey, kid, just get in front of the mic and just read off this thing?
Not at first, no. I didn't know this at the time, but it was actually my audition.
Oh.
They said, let's bring in that kid. So I was contacted. I think it was my English teacher had said, they said they wanted to, remember it's a small town. They said they wanted you to come in. And so I came in and they recorded and Lane. So Lane Lindstrom, who was the engineer, he owned half the station. He had a controlling interest in it. He also did DJ work and he could repair anything. He had me come into the studio. It was reel to reel. That's how far back we're going.
Wow.
And he set it up and he had the microphone and he just said, all right, now I just want you to read what you see here. And before you start, just say 3, 2, 1, and then read off the date and say your name and what school you're from. And I said, okay, fine. And so I sat there in this little recording room studio by myself. And I was reading it and I got pretty good at it. I was going at a good clip and I was like, all right, and he told me, if you mess up, just stop, go back, say 3, 2, 1, and start again. And we were coming up on the end of October. And I know this because the schools and the school lunch ladies or lunch preparers, they like to get creative around the holidays. And I don't know if you've ever watched or heard outtakes on things where people just lose their shit and can't stop laughing.
Yeah, totally.
I wish I had this recording. I so wish I could remember what school it was, but let's just say it was Sonneman. So I was at Sonneman schools. And the thing they had was cheesy weenie critters. Yeah. It's taken me 20 plus years to be able to say that without laughing.
This has given you PTSD.
Oh my God.
For 20 years. You have PTSD from reading.
Yeah. So I get through it. I'm just like, Sonneman schools, cheesy, and I'm just dying laughing. And
was everyone else laughing too in the studio?
No, I'm alone. Alone.
Oh, okay.
There was business to be done. There were like 4 other studios and, the newsman is putting his thing together and, everybody's doing their own thing. Occasionally they walk past the big glass window, and they kind of look in and be like, oh, there's a kid in there. He must be reading the school lunches. And at one point I was just dying laughing. And I was actually like pounding the desk and like trying to gain my composure. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. And I'm looking over and this tape is running out. There is a physical representation of how much time you have.
Right.
Before there's a problem.
And you don't get another tape. This is your audition. It's like...
Well, I didn't know that. I just wanted to do right. I wanted to do well by them, because I knew someone had to edit it.
Is there a producer looking at you through a window? Is this like
No.
Is this like Frasier, where there's Roz over sitting there going, hey, turn it up or turn it down or slow down?
There could be for certain things, but no, Lane just came in. Lane had a lot of work to do. He came in, he set up the microphone, he did the thing, and he gave me a little once over of, how things work and stuff. And he says, but don't touch any of that. It's fine. I've heard you speak. I've looked at your levels on the needle on the meter.
Right.
Go for it. And he just left me alone. So I'm in there for about, 25, 30 minutes. And I get to the cheesy weenie critters bit, and I'm just dying laughing. And finally, I turned and I know somebody was going to have to listen to this. And I said, I'm so sorry. You have to edit this. I'm going to try again. I'm going to get it this time. And I went through and I did it. And then later, over the next week, I heard my lunch readings in the morning, before going to school. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And every kid, they'd have like 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds who could read, come in and say, yeah, Saganash, they're going to have fried chicken with mashed potato, so whatever. It was a teenager. Well, I then found out later that they were interested in hiring a high school student and would I be interested to come in. And so I did. And I found one of my old pay stubs not too long ago. And I was making $4.25 an hour. That was what minimum wage was.
That's right.
95?
92.
Oh, no, 92, 91, 92. Yeah. And so I started working there, and I did. Then I learned about mic technique. I learned about levels. I learned how to edit. I learned how to do editing with the physical tape, because you would have to take the tape, and you would physically maneuver the wheels of the tape, the reel-to-reel machine, so that you start into a word, so you could cut it right where where whatever you needed to edit. And so you take the tape physically, you would mark it with a little wax pencil, and then you pull it out and you put it in this little trough that had a little diagonal groove in it, and you take a razor blade and you cut it, and then you bring the tape over to where the other mark you'd made, and then you cut it, and then you tape the tape together with like a special type of tape.
I just think it's funny because we use all this these icons on programs these days that really just harken back to those old processes. So if you go to Final Cut Pro, for example, or no, forget even recording software. If you go to Microsoft Office, right, and you press the save button, it's a little diskette, and nobody even knows what. I wonder if people today even know what that is. They're like, why is there a weird blue square as a save button? And the razor blade tool, it's an actual razor blade that she used to edit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that there are people who are old enough to drink legally who have no clue. Absolutely no clue. I can tell you a real side note. When I used to work at when I worked at a comic book store here in Chicago, I worked with a young man, and we were talking. He's a musician. He's actually a professional musician. He's in a band called Tanzan, and they're doing very well. But he was maybe about 15, 16 at the time. And we were talking about noises and old technology. And I mentioned something about a dot matrix printer.
Yeah.
And you remember those? And there's the paper with like the dots on the side where the little cogs, the wheels would bring it forward. And I told him about the dot matrix printer, and he said, well, that's an odd name. What do you mean? What does it do? And I said, well, it was a printer, and it used little hammers and an ink ribbon, almost like a typewriter, but you couldn't use it at night. And he goes, why couldn't you use it at night? I said, well, you couldn't print anything if people were asleep, because you'd wake up the whole house. And he said, what do you mean? How could that happen? And I said, well, you've got this paper that's taut, and you have these little hammers that are going on little servos that are going back and forth, and it would make this horrible noise. And now as a musician, he was really piqued, and he goes, well, what did it sound like? And I said, well, it was kind of like I'm doing the best thing I can. And he was like, oh, I wonder what it really sounds like. And I was like, hey man, we got the internet here. So I pull up internet and I put in dot matrix printer sound. And there's a real dot matrix printer, and you see the guy get the paper set up and everything, and then it starts to print, and then they edited out the real sound of the printer. And it was a dude's voice going, and he looked at me with his jaw open. He goes, man, it really does sound like that.
What's funny, the
rolling
place
on the floor.
Well, the place that the dot matrix printer, probably the place that if you've ever heard one, because they were so expensive even at the time that you probably didn't own one in your house. It's the DMV, right? It's like that's where you had the dot matrix printer, and that's where you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna print out your license or your registration, and we'll just go and do that, right? But I have a question though. You're doing all these things in the studio at 15, right? You can't drive yet. Right?
No, I had an FCC license before I had a driver's license. I always loved that.
So you're in a small town, and everybody knows what's going on with everybody else. What was the reaction like? Because are you the football dude? Are you doing this and the football jock and the quote unquote nerd? Or is this? Or are you like the anomalous? Oh yeah, Charles does this radio thing, and we hear him over the announcements on the radio about school lunches.
Well, I mean, that was just the first. That was just the start. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of an outlier in a lot of different ways. I mean, I did theater. I didn't just do it like, oh, it'd be fun to do the spring play. I was like, no, I do theater. You know, I wasn't quite the the tortured theater major
Yeah.
yet, but yeah, I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life, and I would go with my parents to the nearest town, hour plus drive away, and go to the symphony, at least once a month. And these were not things that were done. Sports, absolutely not. I did clubs. I liked organizing things. So like Spanish club, AV library club. There was a volunteer thing. But no, I mean, really the thing was, yeah, Charles does the radio and Charles does acting. Those were the things that were kind of, I was more or less known for. Also photography.
What or who inspired you to do that? Was there like a seminal moment, a teacher, something that you saw, something you read that said, this is for me, like this fits?
I think I hadn't given it a whole lot of thought until you approached me about this. And the one name that kind of keeps coming up for a lot of different things, not just what we've talked about so far, is Garrison Keillor.
Really?
Yeah, I come from a pretty solid background, I'd say on both sides of the family, of storytellers. That's interesting. You grow up in your own family and you have what you think is normal. You have this idea growing up, you're like, oh, this is what is. It just is. And
Right.
then as you get older and you go out into the world, or maybe you don't, but you get older and you recognize other people and families and the way they live, you recognize things that, oh yeah, I guess this isn't the norm, or this is not how other people live or express themselves. Case in point, my grandfather was a doctor. He was a radiologist. He was a DO. He used to have his own private practice prior to getting into radiology. And my father worked in medicine, healthcare management. He was an administrator. And so in my family, discussing medical issues, biological functions,
Right.
that's just something you did. And once I got to college and realized, oh, people are not comfortable with that. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, Garrison Keillor. I mean, he was a man who was a writer. He did broadcasting. He had a weekly radio program, and he told stories. I don't know if you're familiar with A Prairie Home Companion.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And for a good 30 years, I think.
That's right.
Still
Yeah,
going, just under another.
Well, I was going to say, poor guy. What do you think of all that? Just as an aside,
About what? About the
his whole
controversy?
exit. Do you think he should have just stayed in it and said, this happened? There's sides of this story, but I built this whole infrastructure over the years. I'm going to keep going.
Well, I think there's a few things going on there. I can't speak to what actually happened.
Yeah.
I think it was certainly it was a perfect storm of a lot of things happening and a lot of things that needed to happen. As for what actually happened with him, I don't know the specifics. I probably never will. I have tried over the years to I try to temper what my feelings are about a particular artist, whatever that may be, from it's tough. It's really tough. I mean, you brought that up, and in the video component, I made one of those faces because it's difficult. It really is. What do I think about it? I think that he was certainly at a point in his life where he could have stepped away, and he'd handed over the reins to someone else for the program, at least the weekly live broadcast. He's still doing broadcasting in his own way. It was taken off of National Public Radio, but he still has the Writer's Almanac, which is now a podcast, and I believe it can be or may be picked up by some radio stations. I don't know if anybody picked it back up. Yeah, I mean,
It's a tough situation.
My heroes have always been kind of, it's funny. I had a conversation with somebody a few weeks ago where they were talking about meeting celebrities. And I said, honest to God, I used to work at the Shed Aquarium here in Chicago.
That's right.
And one of my job there was to host the shows with the dolphins and whales. So I'd get up there and
No way.
present the animals. I had nothing to do with their training. I was just up there as mouthpiece, whatever. But it was a great job. I loved it. I love the people. I love the organization. And occasionally you'd have celebrities would come in, and if I can't think of any offhand, but I was talking with a friend. I said, if Tom Cruise came in, I would not go out of my way to go see him. Not because of anything I don't feel like I like I don't like the person. It just, he doesn't excite me. It's like, yeah, he's a big movie star. He does great big movies. But when John Rhys Davies, the character actor, came in, like I had somebody cover my shift and I kind of did a little covert like, oh, there he is.
Did you talk to him?
Like, no. That's the thing. I will rarely ever speak to a celebrity. There are a few times I have. But I mean, like, unless I have anything that I want to say to them or to relate, which, what are the odds of that? Then I'm just kind of, I give him wide berth. I don't want to bother somebody. For goodness sakes, he was with his family at the aquarium. You see people come up to celebrities when they're having dinner, when they're like eating. Can you imagine every time you went to go, I don't know, get a coffee or sit down to eat a burger, have everybody trying to come up to you? I just think that'd be awful.
So there's a weird thing with fandom, right? You feel familiar with somebody that you don't really know, but what you're really familiar with is their character, not their person. And so you feel those can get confused. So you're going up to dinner, you're like, oh my gosh, this is Iron Man. Like, no, it's not Iron Man. This is a person who plays Iron Man. He's a family and he's at dinner with them and he probably just wants to be left alone.
And the funny thing is that's not just relegated to children. Adults will make that distinction, that mistake of confusing a performer with their performance, or the character that they play.
So, Dooney, the first time we met, because you have a very, you're very different from most people in that your charisma is overriding almost, right? Because you can tell, not in a bad way. I'm just saying that in the way of, you just don't seem like the person who ever gets nervous. And I think from your story about being 15 and being called up in a professional studio, it didn't seem like you were nervous then. And have you ever been nervous? As you've gone and progressed through stage acting, all the other types of things you've done with improv and, in studio and voiceover, do you get nervous and how do you deal with that? Because there's so many people who have such trouble doing that, being on stage or even speaking in front of a board meeting or a meeting at work, right?
Well, it's funny you should say that because, I've come to realize over the last couple of years, I'm like a negative, to use a photography term. I know you're a big photography nut. And not that, sorry, your work is fantastic. I don't.
Oh, thank you.
No, you're not a nut. You're not a hobbyist. No, you're a photographer. But I'm a bit of the negative of that because there was a somebody, I think one of his ex-wives said about Johnny Carson once that he was great in front of an audience of millions, terrible in a room of 10.
Interesting.
And the biggest audience I've ever performed in front of was 2,500 people. And when I was at the aquarium, I would be in front of groups as small as 50, but that amphitheater could go as high as about 900, if it's all packed. I think it's about 8.
But so you're the acting guy, you're the performer, the stage person, the dramatist, the thespian, if you will, in high school, and you're progressing through. So the Shed Aquarium, so having growing up in Chicago for a while, that is a staple place on that Museum Row, right? I think it's right next to, it used to be next to Meigs Field before they tore it down, I think, right? But anyway, that's an aviation story for another time. But so how did you get out of this town? Where did you go next?
Prior to getting out of the town, you wanted to know how things happen, what those turning points are. By the time I was a junior in high school, I had realized I was an Eagle Scout, and I made it to the rank of Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts. For those who don't know, that's the highest rank you can get. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and I made it all the way to Eagle with my father's foot firmly implanted in my ass. And by the time I was 16, 17, I was done. I was like, I made it to Eagle. I'm all scouted, camped out. And summer was coming, and my dad said, "What are you going to do this summer?" And I said, "Well, I can tell you what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to summer camp."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you're not going to sit around all summer." And I said, "No, I'll work. I'll get extra shifts at the radio station." And he said, "Well, aren't you going to do anything else?" And I said, "Well, like what?" And he said, "What about camp?" And I said, "What did I just say?" And he said, "There are other camps other than scout camp."
Right.
And I went, "What?" I didn't know. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, there's got to be other camps, like, I don't know, you like to cook. There's got to be cooking camp, and I'm sure there's a theater camp." And I went, "Hold up, what?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, that sounds really good." So he said, "All right, well, I'll look into it." So in 1995, my father, pre-internet, went on the phone and started looking up numbers. He called all the universities that he could reach in Illinois, asked to speak to somebody in the theater department, and said, "I have a son, he's 16, and he wants to be an actor. What is the best summer program for a young actor in Illinois that you can think of?" And hands down, they all told him the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, Illinois. And so he contacted the Steppenwolf and said, "I understand you have a summer program and for high school students." They said yes. He said, "All right, so what do you need? How much is it?" And they said, "Well, there's an audition process." And he said, "Okay, fine." And he said, "Well, when are the auditions?" And he said, "Where are they?" And then the person on the other end of the line said, "Well, where are you?" And he said, "Oh, well, I'm in Central Illinois," which was about a 2-hour drive away. And the person said, "Oh, yeah, this is really more for people who live in the city and in the suburbs, because, it starts at like 8 a.m. It's Monday through Friday. It's probably not for someone who lives that far away." And that kind of got my dad's dander up. And he just said, "We'll worry about that ourselves. How about you tell me when the audition is and what's needed?" And so he did get the information, and he plopped it in my lap. And I said, "Oh, okay." So I prepped an audition. And we drove up to Chicago, and I auditioned at the Steppenwolf Theater on a Saturday. And my audition was abysmal.
Tell me everything about it. I want to know.
Well, the long and short of it is when you are doing community theater in a small town, if you don't have the wherewithal, the exposure, and understanding, people play against their age range all the time in community theater.
What does that mean?
Oh, well, you wouldn't have a 16-year-old playing a father to an adult.
Oh, right. Just because you don't have as many people to.
Right.
So when you're the pool of people to choose from.
Yeah, high school theater, children's theater, whatever, you can't be real picky about that. And so I chose an well, first of all, I chose a piece from a film, not from a play. And it was a monologue that Jason Robards gave in Something Wicked This Way Comes. So I'm basically playing an old man talking about his son. I'm like 15, my balls have barely dropped. And I go up there and do this audition, and I didn't know how to hold myself and do all these things. But they did see something there. So I was asked, okay, they tried to coach me through it, and then they just kind of scrapped it, and they said, "Tell you what, why don't you tell us a story, tell us about the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, we'll give you a couple of minutes to think of it." And I said, "No, I've got it right now." And so I related this story to them. And when I was done, they were all laughing pretty hard. And it was that story. It was being able to relate that story and relate what's going on and what was in my head and the circumstances and the just, god-awful embarrassment. And so I got the position. And
wow.
they only had, I think it was 18 students, young people at the time. And I ended up, the summer of 1995, I had my own apartment at age 15 at just off of Clark and Division on Elm Street, just blocks from the lake. And
oh my gosh.
It was an efficiency. So that summer I was living alone. I was doing my dishes, buying groceries, doing laundry, and taking the L up to the Steppenwolf 5 days a week.
If I could just back up just for a second, because I'm still impressed with how supportive your family was through this whole thing. Because if, I could just imagine if I said, "Oh, I want to be an actor," in my house, I'm like, Right. No. Right. It's not that they wouldn't have been supportive if I really pushed for it. It's just, both my parents are both physicians, and we come from a family of scientists and engineers and things like that because, I'm Asian. So no, I'm kidding. Given the scope and craziness of Bollywood, we all know now that there's a large, if you want to call it acting, you can. I don't know. This probably shouldn't be put in that category. But anyway, they would have been so unfamiliar with the whole thing. And the pragmatic logistics of it also would have been terrifying to them. Like, how are you going to find a job? That's not a thing, blah, 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 And it seems like you didn't have that environment. As you said, you came from a family of storytellers. They were so supportive of it.
Not always. And what's interesting is that at this point, this actually plays into that situation. Because up till that point, I'm now between my junior and senior. I've got, my next year is my senior year. It's the summer. It's time to look at college. Are you going to go to college? Where you want to go? What do you want to study? What can you afford? A lot of these things all play together. And at that point, there was contention between myself and my parents that I wanted to go to school and study acting. And there would be kind of yeah, okay, we could, yeah. Huh. And my mother would always say, well, what about journalism? And I say, what about journalism? She'd say, but you're at the radio station. I'd say, that would be broadcasting, not journalism. Two very different things. No. And so this kind of back and forth was happening. And because there had been a big push for me to be, I think, I can't crawl inside my parents' heads, but I think at the time, because there had been such a push for me to be an Eagle Scout, and because I had finally
where'd that push come from?
Through. Well, my mother's biological father passed when she was quite young, and a few years later, my grandmother remarried. And so my grandfather, who was a doctor, he was an osteopath and a radiologist, raised her as his own and is always who I knew as grandfather. But her biological father had been an Eagle Scout, and she had his Eagle badge, which is it's really beautiful. I mean, it's a silver eagle with wings spread, and it's a red, white, and blue, ribbon that hangs down from a banner. It's a really beautiful thing. And she had always wanted to have that presented to her son. If she had a son, she wanted to have that presented to her son. And also, given some of the shortcomings and some of the problems that have faced the organization, the Scouting of America, formerly Boy Scouts of America, they do a lot of good. They've done a lot of good. There have been problems, so I'm not gonna badmouth the organization. It wasn't. I got a lot out of it. I'm very grateful for it, but it wasn't something that I was really interested in at the time. As a result, I used to say from like about age 20 on, people say, "Hey, let's go camping." I'd say, "You have a good time," because I got all that out of my system by age 18. My idea of roughing it is going to a Holiday Inn without a holodome. So, so I think having met those expectations, there was a little leeway, and that's why they were willing to allow me to do this camp thing. Consequently, after having done that for the summer of 1995, coming out of it, there's a woman named Mary Ann Thebus. She was one of the instructors. She's an actress. I think I ran into her last spring, and she was with her family. And I don't know, she might still be teaching. But anyway, if you've ever seen the film Rudy,
the
movie Rudy, she played Rudy's mother.
No, I actually just saw that film 2 days ago.
Yeah. Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing of it is my favorite, you'll remember this, one of my favorite scenes with her in it is, Rudy comes home for the holidays. He didn't make the cut for like the umpteenth time.
Right.
He walks in the door. Everybody looks into his eyes, and they just know it. They just know, oh, he didn't make it. But mom is in mom mode. And so she's running around the house, and she's like, let me take your coat and do this. And, oh, you need to eat, Rudy. And she's the only one who doesn't get it. That's Mary Ann Thebus. Yeah,
I remember that. I know exactly who you're talking about now. That's so interesting. It's totally random that I saw that movie just 2 days ago with Catherine. But because
sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Oh,
The
I was
reason
just
why.
saying at the very end, when he finally gets to dress and go out on the field, right? So his dad's so proud, and because she was like, "Where is he? Where is he?" And the dad's like, "Right over there! Don't you see him? He's right there!" He's so excited. Just totally plays that part. But so yeah, how did she?
Well, I bring her up because
Yeah,
this program, which was over a number of weeks, at the end of it, we had a, a showcase, and it was for local talent scouts and for mostly for family. And my parents came up to see our showcase, our presentation, and afterwards there was a little reception, and Marianne Thebus took my parents aside and she spoke to them. And to this day, I don't know entirely what she said to them,
huh?
but from that point forward, there was absolutely no pushback.
So this was hard. I mean, if I just focus on that summer, right, at the Steppenwolf, how hard was it? Because you're around pros. I mean, everyone knows the Steppenwolf Theater. This is
Well,
the
I'm around other high school kids,
right,
and they were all very sophisticated
right.
compared to me. They were all wonderful, lovely people, but they all, even at high school age, had a lot more experience. It was difficult to me, but I feel like it's one of the times that I really rose to the challenge because this was everything that I'd wanted. This was everything I'd hoped for. This was freedom of expression, freedom to do as I pleased, freedom of maturity. I've got to do my dishes.
Yeah,
I've got to get groceries.
yeah.
I got to do the laundry. I'm running out of underwear. And I did that. And also, I'll remind you, this was the summer of 1995 where it was so hot that people were dying.
Yeah.
And it was also the summer that they reopened Navy Pier.
I know that summer.
Yeah. And it was just it was one of those bookmarks, one of those sort of hallmark events, not hallmark like the card company, highlights of my life that really shaped and changed who I ended up becoming.
So that's a node in your life, right? Where
Yeah.
do you still keep in contact with the other students
I do.
and from that summer
Yes.
there?
Yeah. Some of us are really quite close, and just was texting with one of them who's now, she's a performing actress. She's working. She's living in Brooklyn. She's spent some time in LA, and she does stand up. And her name is Nahara Nishal. Yeah. And some people even left the country and went off to do other things, and we still keep in touch. But it was that event and that experience, plus the input from Marianne Thebus, that allowed my parents to get over that idea that my mother was a teacher. She taught public school. She worked with children with learning disabilities, and my father was a former Air Force man who was a CEO who worked with numbers in business. And my sister, she went in, she studied math and education. She's now a businesswoman. She's got so many things on her plate. And she, I really kind of diverged way off into left field, but yeah, I did have support. I did. It wasn't there in the beginning readily, but it was always given. It was always given.
And so then now you've gotten better at your craft. You've made incredible friends, incredible mentors. You've been exposed to teachers. Also, just lived the life. You skipped almost a year ahead, right? As a high school student, you were independent to the level of like what I was when I first got to college. You're coming back now into senior year, and you're trying to choose what you want to do. So, what was that choice like? What options were in front of you?
Well, it went from a choice of financial to looking at what schools had the program that I wanted to be a part of, but also those schools that wanted to have me, because you had to audition to get in. And I went, oh gosh, what is it? It's either Memorial Day or Labor Day weekend. I can't remember which one it is, where they have the general auditions for all the theater schools here in Chicago. And they do it in the, one of the hotels downtown, which is also where they have International Mr. Leather for the that community. So you have all these bright, fresh-faced, young thespian wannabes, and these people who have this lifestyle with the leather and very very open sexuality, and they're all just kind of meeting together in this one hotel for one weekend, which is very funny. I ended up going to those generals to audition, and I auditioned for Juilliard. They didn't want any part of me.
Why? What was that like?
It was like a cattle call. At least in 1996, it was. Yeah, I came in. They had us do a great big room exercise where there were, gosh, there must have been about 20, maybe 24 of us in the room. And do this, do that. Now move like the wind. Now you're a tree. Do all the sort of stereotypical acting exercises.
Is that? I mean, to someone who's not an actor or has never been through that, is that normal? Is that just par for the course?
I think for introductory level, yeah, I think it is. You want to see if people are connected to their body, if people are conscientious of the way they move and things. And then after they had this group audition, and there's like a panel about 4 or 5 people all just kind of looking at us and making notes. And then they sent us all away, and then they would have people in one at a time to come in and do their 2 contrasting monologues, which I did, and that's all right. The odds of getting into Juilliard, you've got to have a lot of things figured out and working up front, and they really do take the best of the best. And so, yeah, I'm not ragging on them or anything. It's not like I'm not surprised. I was very green and very raw at the time.
But you must have had some gumption, though, because, I mean, you just got out of the Steppenwolf the summer before. That was difficult, and a very famous theater. How did you have a loss
for it?
Right.
I mean, it was something that was paid for. It wasn't like I was selected purely based on talent. You know what I mean? It was
right.
I don't want to oversell what it was, but yeah, I mean, I had dreams, I had aspirations, and there was a program at DePaul that I wanted to get into, and they have acting, which is like a studio program where you have to audition to get in, and then they have general theater studies, which is you study acting, but you also you basically spend equal amounts of time studying theater history, directing, lighting, sound design, set design, costuming, all sorts of things. And I knew that as much as those other aspects were interesting and I wanted to learn about them, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to perform, and that was it.
Right.
And so when I was not accepted in the performance program at DePaul, but they were willing to offer me general theater studies.
So, dude, you didn't see that as a big loss of confidence or something? I mean, because this is the one thing that I did want to ask about, this whole idea of rejection. It's such a common thing. Every single time you see an actor talk on TV about this, a stage actor or whatever, like, oh yeah, just get used to being rejected all the time. And that's something that I'm obviously not comfortable with. I mean, a lot of other jobs, you don't have that as part of the things you have to go through that much. I mean, we all obviously apply for things. I went to medical school, got rejected through a bunch of them, other colleges and stuff. But it just seems like this part of being an actor, the job of being an actor, could really cause a lot of emotional trauma, right? How do you deal with that?
It's difficult. It really is. And you really... It's a challenge that needs to be met with equal parts, I think, in order to maintain. It needs to be met with equal parts humility and also with realism. Because if you audition for a play, let's say, and there's a role you want to play, and you audition and they don't take you, and you figure that was like your best audition you've given, even you may know somebody who was there or somebody who's a part of it, and they're just like, that was awesome. They let you know later or kind of on your way out or something, and you don't end up getting it. And then you see the person that got it, or you hear the person who got like a voiceover gig or something. But particularly with performance, they may have thought you were fantastic. They may have decided, we really like this guy. However, we have already cast another person who looks very similar. Or it could be a question of height, that they've already cast the ingenue or the person they're going to be opposite. And they decided that, this actress is, of a certain height. We kind of need to have a guy who's taller because she's not going to be walking around in flats in this performance, in this show. So there's so many things that could work against you that have little to nothing to do with your own abilities, skill, talent, that once you kind of accept that, that's so freeing. It's so it sounds pessimistic, but there's a bit of grace in that, in understanding that, oh yeah, it doesn't mean that I'm not good. It doesn't mean that I did anything wrong. There's so many factors that are beyond your control.
Yeah.
They may already have a guy who looks just like you. I said that already, but
And is that something, I mean, when you go to medical school and you're trying to choose what specialty, the medical profession, as you know, because you've been around it in your family, being a radiologist is so incredibly different from being an obstetrician, from everything from the science involved and the day-to-day, who you hang out with, the procedures you're doing, the room you sit in, right? They're almost like completely different, completely different, unrelated professions, right? It's amazing that you can go through medical school, you learn some corpus of knowledge, and you get to branch out. At that point, did you know that you wanted to do voiceover or improv, or were you just like, I'm open to anything? If you give me a part, I'll go try it out and do it. Or did you go, no, I wanted to be in film or on stage?
I had ideas of where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. But I'm really glad you asked that, because another sort of branching off, something that really led me to where I am today, is I had one particular professor. His name is Rick Barrows. And Rick taught on-camera film. The program I went to at the University of Illinois was a studio program, and you had to audition to get in, and then at the end of your sophomore year, you had to re-audition to stay in the program.
Huh.
Yeah, there were, I think, 30 freshmen, and only 9 of us ended up making it to graduation.
What did the other people do?
Changed a major. Some went into theater studies, or went into costume design, or went into, maybe even changed their major entirely, or went to a different school.
But that is so odd, though. I mean, because that doesn't happen like if you're going to be a biology major, right? The whole point is you're there to learn it, and they're trying to instruct you. I mean, isn't it weird to weed people out at such a early stage of training?
I can see that argument, but I can also follow that up with the one, not to change the subject back, but
Yeah.
Rick, who helped shape my future, he said the odds of you making it, being successful, being a big time actor, are decimally small.
How small?
The odds of you being able to support yourself as a performer are almost as small. It's a very difficult way to make a living. And I think that it's not any kind of snobbery or any kind of, we only have time for the best and the brightest. But
Yeah.
I think it's a way of helping people not chase after something that isn't for them. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I can't speak to, but I think that particular program, being is kind of rarefied, and you had to be, if you missed one class, once you made it into the studio from sophomore year on, or even before that, if you missed one class, that's grounds for them to bring you in and talk to you about maybe changing your major or
Wow.
not being in the program at all.
Did you ever miss one class?
Eventually. There's a story for that, and that's how I met you.
Really?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Well,
but anyway, so what happened with Rick is that
Yeah.
Rick took me aside one day, and he said, I know, he kind of reiterated the thing about, being able to support yourself as a performer, but he said, I think you need to look into voiceovers. And I didn't know what voiceovers were. I just knew people did, were the voices of, the Smurfs and cartoons, and at that point, some video games. But I didn't know it as a career, as a thing. And he said, you have history and background working with recording equipment, microphones. You worked in radio for 4 years prior to coming here. And he said, you have a voice and you know how to use it as an instrument. And he said, I really think you should look into it. And so upon graduating, there were a couple of things that kind of got in the way. Eventually, in 2002, 2 years after graduating college, I came to Chicago with the goal of getting into voiceovers.
Well, Dooney, I just want to stop you for a second because I've never heard anyone say it like that. Your voice as you know how to use your voice as an instrument, and that is a very beautiful way to talk about what voiceover actually is.
It can be. It's interesting that you mentioned medicine as being this sort of varied branch, the difference between a gynecologist and, a radiologist or an ER doctor. The same, to some extent, can be said about voiceovers, because there are people who are strictly doing character animation work, people who do animation like The Simpsons. There are people who do commercials. There are people who do industrial work. There are people who do audiobooks, which is a form of performance in itself. There are also people who do things that are kind of dry, like doing like industrial work, readings of manuals. For a long time, when the economy had a slowdown, I was doing somewhat well by just doing the audio components for big corporations, where at the time you would have like a CD-ROM that you would have somebody put in their computer, and they would watch this thing from HR, and it was like, how not to commit sexual assault in the workplace, or how to get along with coworkers. And it's just this script that's reading, it's like, Eric and Benny have a problem. They have, so it's this very straightforward stuff. But I mean, there's so many different ways and types of work that can be done. Some of it's medical. Some of it's very clinical. I've auditioned for some things where I've had to, I just threw out one of them where I had to talk about this mesh that helps skin heal. And there were cytokines and all these different terms in there that were, I had to go, wow, I got to go on YouTube and see how is this pronounced. It's got like 6 syllables, and I'm like going like,
at least that sounds complicated, because I'm on the receiving end of something, because in the waiting room in some of these clinics you have these videos, right, where patients are watching and they're like, your heart is a pump, blood comes in and it goes out, there are 4 chambers, and it's like you think like, oh, that's someone's job who's doing that, right, who has to create that content, and that's not trivial.
No, well, and that's directed at the patient, so that's kind of at entry level, level 1 stuff. But then there are conventions. And there are, seminars and things that they have to have this voice that presents what's trying to be understood. And so they have to get under the hood and do the nuts and bolts of it. And you have to be able to say all these things.
So when he said, voiceover is the path for you, did you go, you know what? Yes, that clicks. Or were you like, no, I don't know about this?
Well, he didn't put it as such that, like, I think this is the only chance you're going to be able to, keep a roof over your head. He said that you need to be able to have something under your belt. And he always said this to all of us. You need to have something under your belt to fall back on and to pay the bills. Because even if you are working steadily or you're performing, the kind of money that you might be making might not be enough. So you need to have something else. And for those who are good with their hands and tools, it might be, I have a friend named Mike. He's done films, he lives here in Chicago. He and his wife did a feature film together. You can watch it on Amazon Prime.
What is it?
His thing, oh gosh, I'd have to look it up. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyway, his thing has, he knows how to work tools. He knows how to build things. You give him tools and the supplies, and he can build a shelf. He can build, whatever. And he used to do set building. For, I believe, for theater, I know for film. And so while he is a very good performer, that ended up kind of becoming his thing. And so he was trying to instill in all of us, not saying you're not going to succeed, but, be realistic, be prepared, have something else, and make sure it's something that you like to do, something that you can do well. One of the actresses that I went to school with, Jessica, she ended up becoming a very well-regarded editor in film. And she's out in LA, from what I remember. I think she's still doing that. Haven't had a chance to talk to her in a while. So anyway, so it was Rick Barrows. He was the one who really started me on this path. And from that point forward, there was also 1 or 2 other people who kind of went, yeah, that is probably something you should look at doing. And that's how I ended up doing that. Now, as for the other thing, as to how I met you,
Yeah.
the 4 years that I was at the University of Illinois in that studio program were a very tumultuous 4 years. We had 4 different department heads in 4 years.
Wow.
It was a big time of change. And
what was going on with the program? Why did that happen?
As best I can tell, I mean, there was a husband and wife duo who were kind of like the Lunts, you know, the husband and wife performance team. The husband was the head of the department prior to me joining the school, and he and his wife were at an age where they were going to retire. And when he left these huge shoes to fill. So one of the other professors stepped in temporarily from having taught theater history to take over for a year. Then they brought in somebody after that, and it came to light afterwards that that person was there as a bit of an axeman. And his purpose was to identify 2 people within the whole department, not just performance, but design and set building and costuming and makeup and whatnot, to owe tenure upon 2 of these people, and everyone else who didn't have tenure was out and replaced. And it was during that tumultuous time that you had to audition to get in, and your freshman year you were not allowed to be in any productions as a performer.
Why?
The reason being, and I think this is a good idea, is that you've just gone to college, you're on your own, it's a whole new world. You need to understand how to budget your time. You need to understand how to study. You still have to get your gen eds. You have to take those classes to graduate. It's not all theater, it's not all performance. And so by restricting you from having any performances your freshman year, that allows you to focus on what needs to be done. Because the other thing is, imagine you don't do your gen ed your first year or your second year, and then you don't make it into the rest of the program. Then where are you? Right. So it makes sense. So there were this change over these 4 years, and it was when that person was in as kind of the axeman. I was now in my first semester, my junior year of college. I'd made it into the program, and I was not cast in any of the productions that year, that semester.
How did you feel?
I had not been cast. I felt terrible. I was mortified. And I still, to this day, I don't know if it was because politically I was maybe backing the wrong horses. I really identified with the professors and the teachers who did not get tenure for the most part. It also could have been an oversight. It is quite possible that it was just an oversight. And in retrospect, after that, they maybe just decided to not acknowledge that I hadn't been cast. But instead of getting upset, instead of getting mad, instead of tucking my tail between my legs, I kind of thumbed my nose. Well, I'll show them. And so in the one production through the theater department that semester, I went to the community college across town, and I did 3 shows in one semester.
Is that a lot?
Yes. Yes. On top of a full course of classes.
How did you do that? How did you budget your time? And
how did I do that? Well, I was young. There was a lot of caffeine. I had something to prove. And how did I do it? Well, I can tell you by the 3rd show, not well. I was burnt out by the time performance number 3 came around, but I did it. And I was really pushing myself hard. I had something to prove. And around the end of that semester, or somewhere, not even the end, it was sometime during that semester. I remember it was around October. Boy, these things always happen in October for me. It was a very unnaturally warm mid to late October. And the theater building has this long hallway. Half of the building is submerged underground. And there's this big long hallway that's just gargantuan, so you can move giant set pieces through if you need to. And it ends in a ramp that goes outside where the semi trucks for the traveling productions would come in and park. And they had the big doors open, and I could smell the breeze. I could see the sun, see everything, and it just looked so enticing. And we were from one class a.m. and we have to go around the stairs and around here and through here to get to the second one. And as we're passing by, and I looked at that big open garage thing, and I was just standing there, and somebody said, "Hey, are you going to come?" And I just turned and I went, "No, not today." And I just turned around and just started walking. And I walked outside, and my head was full of thoughts and emotions, and I was questioning things, and I was upset. And I did this weird thing in my head. I thought, I'm going to turn whichever direction I've never gone. This was the same school my sister went to for 3 years prior to me going there. So I knew a little bit of the town, Champaign-Urbana. And I just, when I came to an intersection or something, if I had always gone left, I went right, and so on and so forth, until I was wandering around and I came face to face with this sign that said, University of Illinois Study Abroad Program. And I just looked at it and blinked and went, huh. And I walked in.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I just walked in, and we're talking, late October, I guess. And I walked in, and there are all the people who work in that office, and they were all very casual and very relaxed, because at this point, all of the people who wanted to study abroad had already done all their paperwork and done everything. They were just kind of waiting for the next semester.
Right. And
I walked in, and I turned to the woman, and I said, "Hi, I'd like to study abroad, please." And she said, "Okay, great. So, where are you looking to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't know yet." And she said, "So you're looking for next," she said, "You're looking for next year?" And I said, "No, I'm looking for next semester." And she went, "Oh." And with that, she popped up, and two other people kind of just perked up, and they just started rushing to filing cabinets and grabbing these binders and saying, "Okay, all right, here, and here." They said, "All right, these are all of the ones that you haven't missed the deadline for yet." And they just put all these binders with country names and schools on them on the table in front of me. and I was like, "Okay, well, great." And I'm looking at all these countries and these locations, and I said, "Well, I'm studying acting." And I said, "To be honest, I'm not sure I want to have a language barrier.
Yeah,
I only speak English, and I need to be able to perform." Oh, great. And they slide all these binders off to the side, and there's Ireland, England, and Australia. And I looked at it, and I remember thinking to myself, well, if you're going to run away, go as far as you can. So I said, let me look at the Australia one. And it was for Monash University in
that's where we went. Yeah.
Victoria, outside of Melbourne, Australia.
Did that's an interesting term you used. I mean, did you at the time see it as running away a little bit? You just needed a break,
Well, it occurred to me while I was standing outside the building and blinking at the sign that I could not take a sabbatical. I could not take a break. Because to take a year off or to do something, or I don't know, go faff around Europe with a backpack, that's not an option in this program.
Right.
If you're out, you're out. And I realized in that moment, that's the only way you can leave the program and still come back.
Got it. So it kind of it checked all the boxes to where you could succeed. But before you even go into that, there's one thing that I've always wondered about, and it's with actors specifically, because there seem to be there's multiple routes for sure, but especially for film, right? It's the struggling actor, screw the school, I'm going to just move myself to LA or something and just roll the dice. And did that ever occur to you to do? I mean, did you ever feel like, yeah, screw this. I don't care if I'm not going to get to Juilliard or a program, or I'm just going to go try to grab an agent, get some headshots and go for it.
No.
Is that just a myth? Is that just a crazy thing that most sane people just don't do? I mean,
I'll tell you this. It's not a myth. A lot of people do it. Not a lot of people succeed, but I can tell you of at least 3 people from that program, not from my year, but from a year behind me, and I believe the year behind that. There are 2 prominent performers who went and did that. They ended up leaving the program, going out west, and one of them had a sitcom on NBC. He was a regular, like a reoccurring role in ER. He was in both barbershop movies. He's doing stuff right now. I just saw him in a couple of commercials. He's doing his name is Parvesh Cheena. And if you ever saw Barbershop, he was the store owner in the first movie where the guy stole the ATM and they were going to break into it, and he's just laughing about it, and they're like, "Don't you care?" And he said, "There's no money in there." And if you've ever seen the Skittles, not that this is the peak, but it's a very memorable one. You know those very bizarre Skittles commercials that they put out years ago?
Yeah.
So there's two guys who meet in a field, and one guy has a big bag of Skittles, and the other one has this big white rabbit, and the rabbit is singing. And the rabbit is singing like in a human voice going, "La, la, 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 la." And Parvesh is the one with the Skittles, and so they do a trade. He gives the bag of Skittles to the guy, and then he gets the rabbit, and the rabbit's singing, and he's petting the rabbit, and then it does a jump cut to him at night. It's raining outside, and he looks like he hasn't slept in about 5 days, and the rabbit is still singing. And he's looking at the guy with the Skittles like, "Oh, I wish I still had the Skittles." That's just...
And that's on tape for the rest of eternity.
But it's fantastic because it's not just a fun, weird commercial. I mean, he sells it. He sells that remorse. He doesn't have any lines. He doesn't say a thing. Anyway, he's a beautiful human being. I care for him greatly, and I love seeing him succeed.
Were you tempted to do that?
Honestly, no. And I think, if anything, that's maybe one of the things that, they say, if you could go back to your younger self,
Yeah.
if you could, the closest thing I think I may have to any kind of regret is anything where I maybe exercised a little extra caution, or held myself back. Let's say that, where I held myself back from doing something because I wasn't sure I was ready, or I did, I've taken risks, absolutely, and many of them have paid off.
When you think back, I mean, just having this conversation, is you took a lot of risks. You walked in at 14 into a radio station and said, "Hey, I want to do this." You walked in, you saw a sign and went and studied abroad. So it doesn't seem like you took a very conservative take or have a conservative attitude at all, right? It seems like you're a pretty good risk taker. Or are you surprised by some of the decisions you've made looking back on it?
Oh, I'm certainly surprised by them. I'm grateful for those. I think maybe on some level, a part of me was sort of like, okay, it's like the mouse that steals the cheese out of the mouse trap and gets away with it, and goes,
Yeah.
"Well, I got the cheese," and then does it again and goes like, "Yeah, I got the cheese." Instead of going, "Yeah, I can get the cheese out of that mouse trap," it's going like, "Well, I got away with it twice. I don't know if I'm going to get away with that again." And I don't know if that, I mean, it's the only thing that comes to mind. Yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful for what I have and where I'm at. And I find the work gratifying, and I want to do more.
And that's what so 20 years later, right, since we first met in Australia, right now, what is your craft? What are you really good at?
I think I'm competent. I'm good at voiceovers. I'm good at being able to deliver what's needed when it's asked of me. The next challenge, what I really want to move forward with, which I think I'm good at, but I haven't pushed myself to do, is to incorporate the storytelling. Because with the voiceovers, it's taking somebody else's material and bringing it to life.
You mean you want to get into the writing part of it, like the creation?
To an extent, but more in storytelling.
Tell me what's the difference?
Well, I mean, the difference between doing voiceovers and doing the storytelling.
No, the writing and storytelling, yeah. Or what do you mean when you say storytelling?
Okay, are you familiar with an organization called The Moth?
No.
Okay, The Moth is an entity. They have a show, a radio show, and a podcast, and it's a venue for professional storytellers to get up in front of an audience and tell a story.
Okay.
And these stories have to be true. So these are people relating true, very personal stories that they experience themselves. And I have listened to the podcasts, and I think there's even a video component. I think one of the paid channels like HBO or Cinemax or Stars or something, they may even, I think they have a filmed version. And I'd like to basically it comes back to Garrison Keillor. I'd like to get up in front of a crowd and do the storytelling myself. There was a smaller version of that here in Chicago that last year I was a part of, and I got up and I did one, and I
How'd
had
it
to
go?
rework it. I think it went well. I'm really proud of it. I have all my good friend Rob did like a 3-camera shoot and audio, did the separate audio capture, and I've been meaning to splice and edit that all together in a finished product.
What do you love about storytelling? Are you still, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are you still as passionate about it as you were 20 years ago when you first started? And what have you learned about yourself?
Well, what I really love about it is I feel like it's a very pure art form. Uh, you know, the earliest, prior to technological advances, the earliest form of entertainment of, getting ideas across from this electric meat
Yeah.
receptacle to another electric powered meat receptacle is to use, I'm paraphrasing this short story somebody wrote, this, I'm using the electricity in my meat suit to flap the meat together and force air through it to take complex ideas.
It is true when you think about it.
And to push it through the air to vibrate in the ear of that other meat suit and then get into their brain. I mean, that's where it started. That's where it's always started. And from, people sitting around fires and explaining things to one another. To me, that's primal and that's base. I've never been very well connected to my body, but someone else who's a dancer might say otherwise. Might say that the physical movement of dance and interpretation and doing that may be their thing. So I'm not negating anybody else's experience. It's just what I have. So being able to reach somebody else and to make them think, to make them laugh, to make them cry, to understand what it's like inside somebody else's meat suit, as it were. Yeah, I think that's it. And what have I learned? I've learned to get out of my own way. That a lot of times when you think you're being clever, or you think you need to embellish or do this or do that, you don't. The editing process, particularly what I did last year with that performance here in Chicago, they have I think it has to be like, it's not even 5 minutes. I think it has to be like under 3 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And that doesn't seem like a lot of time. And it isn't.
Yeah.
Until you have, because you have to also submit it in writing. So it's not this extemporaneous off the cuff thing. So I had to really winnow down and go, okay, well, what details are important and what aren't? And this particular story I had already written as a somebody dreaming.
She
having a dream.
actually is. Yeah, Zoe. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Start over.
No.
The particular
Getting
story
out-
that you'd written.
Oh yeah, is that I'd written this this story that I'd told many times. I'd written it out in story format before. I'd even developed it into a 2-person scene for the stage. But once it was going to be told just as a story in this format, I realized I had to cut certain things out and made it into a very lean, I think probably even a more powerful piece by doing that. So I think the editing, getting out, not trying to be clever, and learning the editing.
It seems like as an actor, you're just in this incredible position to observe the human condition, right? In some ways, I think I feel that way too sometimes as a physician, just because you can't choose who walks in the door, so you get this cross section of humanity. And you know me, I've always been the kind of person who just want to do every job. Right. So if there's someone who's like an electrical engineer, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Or if someone's, I want to try, I just want to see what it's like, even for a day, to experience these other professions. It's just the innate curiosity in me. And so being a physician is just one way where you can do that. Harder in some ways in medicine, like a radiologist is going to have a harder time doing that. But if you're a primary care physician or an ER doc, it's like the full spectrum of humanity is just in one 12-hour shift. You're going to see it. The crazies, the normal people, every emotion, every, the hospital is such a weird place because in one room on one end, people are dying, but in the same building on the other end, people are being born. It's like this whole spectrum. I feel like actors probably see that too a little bit, don't you? I mean, so what have you learned or what surprised you about just people? Because you guys are in some ways like the ultimate people watchers.
When I worked at the aquarium, we get 2.2 million visitors annually. And you would see people from all over, not just the city, but the state or even the world. People are visiting from all over. And you do see that slice of humanity. It is, like you said, it's just anyone and everyone. I think what surprised me is when people... It's easy to get caught up in when people are behaving in ways that you don't want to see. When people are being boorish or people are being rude or inconsiderate. And, sometimes, you just, depending on where you're at, emotionally and where you're at, I don't know, spiritually or wherever you're at in that moment, that day, that hour, that week, you may be prone to seeing one thing over another. But what has surprised me is when people have been kind of showing a state of grace, or when people have been very open in times and situations when you would never expect it.
I have to just relate that back just because we are living in such a strange time right now, right? Where with the COVID pandemic. And have you noticed, is everything that people have been doing or expressing, the crazy runs to the bank or to the grocery store, are these instincts that people have, all the weird politics, is anything surprised you, or are these things as an actor you've seen before in either different roles or experiences working with other actors or audiences?
I don't know. I think it's a time of great insecurity. And when, on so many levels, financially, personally, spiritually, your own health, the health of your loved ones. I think when people, I'm not going to speak for other people. I'm going to speak for myself. When you find yourself in times of insecurity, you want to go to what's safe. You want to go to what you can understand and you can wrap your head around, and to those things that are comfortable. Those things that you have been able to find joy in the past. And some of those things are not accessible given the current situation.
Right.
And so I think people are trying, I did not partake in panic buying, but right around the time when everybody was looking for toilet paper, I ran out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy some toilet paper. I'm going to try and find it. And I'm not going to buy any more than I normally would. And so, I kind of had to go to a few different places. And this is pre-masks and whatnot. And I was able to actually find a package. And there were two packages. And a guy came up. I was in the CVS, the drugstore there, the convenience store. And the guy came up and we both were looking at him. And I just looked at him and I said, I was there already. And I went and I grabbed one and he was looking at it. And I just said, you can go ahead and grab that. I'm not going to get it. And he was just staring at it really hard. And he looked at me and he just said, I don't know if I need it. And I looked at him and I said, well, if it helps, I live alone. This is good for me, And he just looked at me and he said, I have two daughters at home and my wife. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I need it. And I just looked at him and I shrugged and I went, wouldn't hurt. I'm just like, and I had this honest moment with this guy and he just, I don't think we would have ever spoken.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Having grown up in a small town, and the way that you kind of relate to each other. And again, when I was in that town, there were no cell phones.
Yeah.
There was the flip, the StarTAC.
Right.
I
I
had
love
one of
that phone,
those.
by the way. That's still the best phone I've ever owned.
Well, you could run a tractor trailer over that thing; it would still work. But I don't know what it's like today, because I only go back briefly to visit my folks and their snowbirds. They're in Florida right now, and do people still talk and relate to each other, or is it kind of like around here where it's just sort of you're staring at the phone wherever you're at?
Yeah, that's a weird thing because, I was telling this to a friend the other day. Amazon has these new stores that they were going to test out before COVID, where you just walk in and you walk out, and uses AI and machine learning in your phone, and there's no checkout. You just grab the stuff off the shelf and you walk out, and they have these, really slick commercials and everything where this person in New York City is walking in and they go and grab it, and it's like, hey, there's no lines. I think that's a horrible idea. I'm just like, why do we need that, right? I mean, it's just one more way where we're using technology, just my opinion, using technology to drive each other more apart, right? So
Absolutely.
What's really funny to me to see this, especially in the grocery store, is without COVID, we're all standing 1 foot away from each other, not talking, staring at our phones. And now that we are in this pandemic situation where we're doing social distancing, we're 6 feet away from each other, and we're all staring at each other, not looking at our phones, looking like, this is awkward, isn't it? Like, I wish someone was a little closer to me. It's so weird. I think lessons to be learned for sure when the dust settles from this whole thing.
I think this is a game changer. This is going to change so many things in ways that people don't understand yet. I think socially, it's going to change a lot. The way people relate to one another, the way people interact. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet. This could end up becoming. I read an article that it's potential that this could be something that could be cyclical, that happens, seasonally, once a year.
Yeah, well, and how is it impacting your profession? Because it's I can see it happening both ways, right? Because there are less opportunities for people to go to movie theaters. Are you seeing a difference there?
Well, for clarification, I'm not an on-camera guy. I've done a little bit of stuff. I'm really more of a stage and then the voiceover stuff. For stage, it's been absolutely crippling. There's just no way in the current environment,
Right.
and for the near foreseeable future that's going to be even feasible. Is it a boon? Is it going to help? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. You can see, because there's a video component, I'm sitting in a booth right now. I have my own professional recording booth that's soundproof. You can have a jackhammer outside my window and you wouldn't hear it in here. And I made this considerable investment a few years ago. I have, my compression mic, and I have everything all set up here to do this work. And one of the things I never did was actually, like the program you and I are using right now, is that the high quality audio over the internet to connect from one studio to another.
Right.
And it's one of those things, we talked about, regrets, and maybe I should strike while the iron's hot, or maybe I was a little hesitant. I wish I had done this sooner to set this kind of thing up. And right now it's starting where I get most of my voiceover gigs, all, 99.9% of them all come from my agents. And one of the agencies just had one that came through yesterday that said, this is only for people who can use a Source Connect type program to connect via their studio. And the time is now for that sort of thing. The whole goal for this was to do audiobooks. That's my midterm immediate goal, is to get into audiobooks.
Why?
A couple of reasons. One, it's storytelling. It may not be my own story, but it is a way of telling stories. There was an audiobook that was narrated by Blair Underwood. I can't remember which one it was. And Blair Underwood, I don't know if you know who he is, but he was in LA Law, and he's done a lot of work since then. Anyway, I remember listening to this audiobook he did, probably, I must have been back in like 96, 95. And I heard it, and I was mesmerized at how he could differentiate between 7 or more different characters, some of which were female. And it was just through a slight lilt in the voice or a change in pacing or whatever, that I'm not hearing, like Monty Python, where like, oh yes, I'm a lady. It was still a man's voice, but with that slight inflection, it just dissolved. I had that suspension of disbelief where I was like, oh yeah, that's her. It's not, I'm not going, well, which female character is it? No, I mean, in context or even out of context, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. And that's, I want to be able to do. And also from a practical standpoint, that type of work is probably going to be a lot more, in my opinion, once you get into it, once you get it going, it's available. It's steadier work. It may not pay like doing animation or like doing, national radio ads, which I've got a couple out right now.
Really?
Yeah. But it's sort of, you go in, you put in your time, you do your work, and the work is always there.
Have you done work with other people in the studio along with you, like animation? What's that like?
No, I've not. Well, I've done not have I done animation? No, I mean I just did a video game not too long ago, but it was solo work. It was for a video game. I'm not going to go into the details of it because I don't want to. But it's the kind of game that if a kid went to Chuck E. Cheese and they played it, they get the tickets.
Yeah.
To get a little spider ring or whatever they these days.
the $10 spider ring.
There you go. And that was very focused character work, kind of broad, over the top, and I loved that. But I would love to be able to do something along the lines of like a what does Nathan Fillion do? Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it. It's almost like a modern day Indiana Jones. There's like 4 video games into these epic stories with,
I think it's Call of Duty or something like that.
Yeah, that's the war one. He's a thief. Oh, phooey. I can't think of the name right now. It'll come to me. I'm tempted to look it up, but
Dooney, is there a book that you're just dying to read? And I want a follow-up question to that is there any body of work that you've seen with stage, film, or voiceover where you saw it or listened to it, experienced it, and said, damn, I could do so much better than that performance?
Let's see. Is there something I've seen where I thought I could do better?
If I just had a shot at that.
Well, I mean, I will say, I kind of harkening back to earlier when occasionally you'll hear something on like satellite radio, or usually it's not on broadcast radio. I'm one of the few people who still listens to that, I guess. But you'll hear a commercial where it might be where the owner has decided they're going to do the commercial themselves, whether it's on TV or audio for radio or internet, where it's like, so come on down to Bob's Recliners. We've got a deal for you. There was an episode of Better Call Saul when he was trying to sell his airtime, and there was the guy in the lazy boy chair, and he was really trying to get a performance out of this guy, and he's like, you're talking to your friend, just look in that camera, and that's your buddy Ed, that's your buddy, you're just having time. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, yeah. I was literally on the edge of my seat going, he's got to get it, and the guy was like, so come on down to our chair store, we've got a deal for you. It's just like, oh.
Well, it's funny. Do you have directors directing you, or do you have to get into that when you're doing your stuff now? Do you have to get into that role yourself? And how do you do that?
You got to come with a pocket full of things. You got to come with a pocket full of ideas. You got to come as best you can. Sometimes you don't get a look at the script beforehand, so you got to come prepared. You got to have whatever you can. You've got to have some ideas. You got to be willing to let go of those ideas. One of the things that I've learned over the 4 years that I was in school, and I've learned since then, is that when somebody's trying to learn the craft of performance, whatever that performance may be, many times raw talent can be eclipsed by the ability to receive and accept direction. Because you may have this raw talent, this great ability to do X, Y, and Z. However, if what you're doing is not what is needed, we're talking about having other people, other characters, other performers, an overreaching arc, it's not about you. And unless you are, gosh, I don't know, the main character or whatever, it's a one-man show or anything like that, it's not about you. And the director will have some sort of idea of how to make this all work, and you have to give over that ego. You have to let go of, because you may have an idea that you think is just dynamite, that you think is great, and you have to be able to let go and accept. And in the 4 years that I was there, I'd seen performers who started out and it was like, wow, that person is fantastic, and then somebody else and you're like, okay, well, there's some room to grow there. And at the end of that 4 year period, the person who's fantastic is about as fantastic as they were when they walked in the door.
Yeah.
But the other person has grown so much.
Noticeably.
And not just that they went from here to here, it's that they were able to surpass anything that the first person was able to provide or to perform, to do. And so being able to let go of ego and to be open to ideas and suggestions and change, I think that's a big thing.
Well, you've talked about the difference, and you've mentioned a few names. It obviously made a huge difference in your career and how you thought about the craft, and it were inspirational and motivating. Have you thought about being the one giving that instruction, going back to teach and have students?
A little bit. I've kind of begged off, and the thing that's kept me from going there is that, obviously, without naming names, I'll just put it this way: the best instructors, teachers, in anything I'd ever had, whether it was learning pottery or glass blowing or singing, acting, whatever it is, are teachers because they really, really enjoy being able to open up something in their students, to provide something for them, a way to learn and grow in how to do what it is they're doing. The worst examples of instructors I've had, I can even go back to high school, are the instructors who are doing it because, well, I guess I could do this. That there wasn't that inherent passion to teach. I mean, my mother was an educator. She taught for over 35 years. And she was just as motivated and passionate about providing what she could for her students in her last year as she was when I first, was conscientious of what she did and why she did it and how she did it. I don't know that I'm at that point. And the reason being is that when it comes to performance, the instructors that I've had, I'm going to be really diplomatic about this. The instructors that I've had that left the least amount of, I learned the least, I'll just say this, the ones that I learned, sometimes you can learn by people showing you what to do, and sometimes you can learn by people showing you what not to do. And the ones who showed me by showing me what not to do and be from an educational standpoint were the ones who had something to prove. And I think what they had to prove was, well, I may be performing or I may be teaching, but I could be doing this professionally. And then them letting you know that because their own ego gets in the way. And so to answer your question, 5 minutes later.
No, that's okay. This is interesting.
Sorry. But to answer your question, I think that I'd like to reach certain levels within my career. There's certain things that I'd like to accomplish before I would feel comfortable, A, telling anybody else or helping them find their path, and B, being able to set aside what I'm doing, trying to accomplish professionally to help someone else.
Yeah,
I think
that makes a lot of sense.
I'd like to have the experience. I'd like to be able to, know what I'm talking about on a personal level as opposed to just a conceptual level. But also, I want to be able to have that. I mean, I guess it's pride. I want to be able to have that hanging on the wall in my mind to say, I did that, so that I can go. And now it's time for me to help somebody else do that.
And despite all you've accomplished so far, you still don't feel like you've got that thing on the wall yet that you want?
I mean, there are lots of there are lots of things on that wall. I feel like there's one or two things that I'd like to accomplish before I would feel comfortable moving on. So the short answer is yeah. Yeah.
What? I mean, you can't leave it like that. You got to tell us now.
Oh gosh, this has gotten personal, and that's fine. I would really like to be able to. I want to have a couple audiobooks under my belt. I want to have some actual acting done in a video game, in something in animation and or in a video game that has a through line that's a character. It's not just, a squawking head telling you to do A, B, or C so you can win the game. Don't get me wrong. I love the one that I did a couple months ago. But yeah. And you could make the argument that, well, you can teach and do the other stuff at the same time. But, I've done some teaching. I've been a substitute teacher, and I've done some intensive educational things outside of public schools. And I guess I would want to live up to the same standards that my mom set and some of the better educators that I've had in my life before I would step up to do the same.
But one thing I was thinking about, there's one time I think we were in Washington D.C. for a meeting. It was like I don't know, almost 9 years ago now, and there was the chief medical officer of one of these startup companies. Because I'm more in the tech world, I don't practice, right? So he was just an amazing person, very charismatic, and just very empathetic toward people, which is always a good sign when you see a physician who's like that. And so we got to talking, and I was just like fascinated by his background. And he had went to magician school before medical school. That's what he wanted to do. And I said, why did it not work out where you wanted to be a stage performer for magic? She goes, no. I just want to learn more about people and how people perceive things before going to medical school. And I was like, wow, what a great attitude, perspective to have, a very wise choice, that uncommon, unorthodox one. But if we scale that back a little bit, I wonder if things like acting, classes in acting, should be made more available and accessible to people who might not have had that same drive early like you did, right? So the scientists in the world could be better storytellers, right? So the physicians could be better with their patients. What do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think that not only from just a communication standpoint, being able to express yourself and be understood, but also I think from being able to have that ability to look at other people and put yourself in their position, to put yourself in their shoes. Because I mean, there's people watching where you look at mannerisms and the way they carry themselves, or the way they walk, or the way they touch their face, or whatever it is. Don't do that. Don't touch your face. But whatever it is that they do, that's an exterior clue. But once you do, you have to do a character analysis, looking at a script and motivations and trying to figure things out. I think that I would hope that people would be a little more empathetic by being able to look at another person in their situation and to reflect upon that. My mother, there was a seminar that my mom went to about understanding socioeconomic class here in the United States. And there, if you say there's, upper class, middle class, and, lower class, I don't want to say lower, but I don't know what the term is, but just for brevity, we'll just say upper, middle, and lower class. And when discussing food, let's say you're a guest in their home and they feed you a meal.
Yeah.
That someone who is of lower class, when the meal is completed, or what they would ask is they'd say, did you get enough? And the same type of question at the end of the meal in middle class would say, how did it taste? And in the upper class, the question would be, how was the presentation?
Very interesting. Yeah.
And there are three. I wish. Oh, this woman who led the seminar, this Ruby something. I can't think of her name, but that was something that my mother learned related to us here in the family, and it just stuck with me, this idea that, here are three different needs, concerns concerning related to the consumption of food.
Yeah. The context matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that sort of thing, if somebody said, you had people over, or people had you over, and they were just like, oh, how did they ask you one of those three questions? Those are three very different, they come from different places. Yeah. And it's not that one matters more than the other, or, one is kinder than the other. They're all, it just has to do with where those people are coming from. I had a particularly eye-opening experience once where I had a friend who I was doing some performance work, and there were a lot of people from all over the country who had come to work at this place. And it was not too far from where my family was going to be getting together for Thanksgiving. And there were a number of holiday orphans. And I was told by my family, hey, if you got one or two people that don't have anybody to be with for Thanksgiving, bring them on over. I said, great. And so I had one person took me up on it. It was this guy. And we went there, and we sat down, and, the way things in my family is, before the meal, you might have a cocktail or a glass of wine. And then there's little things to nibble on, some cut
snacks,
veggies, or like snacks, cheese and crackers, crudité, whatever it is. So you have a little snack here and there, whatever. And then you sit down to the meal. And with the meal, you might have a glass of wine, or you might have, a refill on your cocktail. And then after the meal, the long meal with all the talking and storytelling and remembrances and all the, the family type of activities. After the meal with the dessert, you might have a little cup of coffee or something, or you might have one last, cocktail or a little aperitif, a little something, a little porter, whatever it is, a little alcoholic drink.
A glass of sherry, yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Well, we got there, and my friend who was there, we walked in, and he had a beer, and that beer was gone pretty quickly. And then somebody offered him a drink, and so he had another beer. And then he had a couple more while we were having the meal. And it was just kind of, oh, okay. And then afterwards, after the meal and everything, he had another beer, and I'm just sitting there going like, well, I'm glad I'm driving. And and afterwards, at one point, a family member kind of leaned over and said, I think your friend has had a few drinks. And I just said, yeah, well, it's okay. And then afterwards, as we left, my friend turned to me as we're leaving, and he just said, man, your family drinks a lot. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, oh my God, everybody was drinking. And I said, oh, okay. And I didn't really think anything of it at the time. And then the next day I said, are you okay? And he said, yeah, boy, your family drinks an awful lot. I said, well, you had a few too. He said, yeah, and he said, but we don't drink before or during the meal. I said, oh, you don't? And he said, no. He says, that's done after the meal. And I've since spoke to some people who understand socioeconomic things, and has said that in some instances people will, have like a cocktail or a couple of drinks, and then that's it. And in some instances, the drinking is the activity.
Yeah, it's weird how there are different things that bring people together. And being Indian, trust me, our customs, which are so different in so many ways in that way, because it's like the guys go to one room, the girls go to another room. This is the weirdest custom, but then all the guys are drinking, the girls are never drinking. At all age groups. It's a very weird, just norm. If you go to an Indian household, that's a normal thing. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's.
No, I haven't.
It's funny.
I'd love to.
Well, the first thing, you should come out to California, where we are. I know we can't.
Not too long ago.
Yeah,
I was out there for a convention.
Oh, really?
And yeah. A few months ago, I had been flirting with going to a voiceover convention in LA. And it's one of those things where I told you about being cautious. I kept telling myself, well, I should go to the convention when I'm a little more established. I should go. No, that's
Just
ridiculous.
go.
I
Yeah,
know.
you should just go.
I finally did.
And
I
what
was
was it
staying
like?
in Studio City. It was, oh my God, it was amazing. It was something that I'm so glad I did. I can say I wish I'd done it sooner, but it doesn't matter. I found it when I needed it. And what's interesting is, I think earlier on you asked like how things happen and how do you make things work. And I think, preparing and planning and doing everything you can to make things happen is one part. There's a quote. It's something about like luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I'd probably paraphrase.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was trying to be careful with my finances, to not spend too much money. And I was like, well, if I'm going to go out there, I need to find an inexpensive place to stay. So I ended up at an Airbnb. And I was like, I think a mile and a half from where the convention was, which was in Studio City, the Hilton or whatever, right by there. And a mile and a half in Chicago is very different from a mile and a half in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Because I didn't rent a car.
Right.
And I was walking. Wow. Going, down a big hill and then up a big hill.
Is that
over?
Is that one of your first times in LA?
It was my very first time in LA, not including the layover on my way to Australia.
Well, that is weird. I mean, just it's so different from the stereotypical actor story, right?
Yeah. The opportunity meets, preparation thing is that I was late on the morning of the convention. I flew in on Friday and I, got situated in my place and then walked and got some food and went back to my little Airbnb. And then the next day I had everything plotted out on Google Maps on my phone that I was going to walk. And it took so long to get there that I missed the first seminar in the convention, which was the one seminar that I was really interested in going to. So I ended up being like 45 minutes late. And I ended up taking like a tram from Universal Studios to kind of get to the hotel and everything.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so
mess.
when I got there, I was frustrated, but I thought, you know what? Just stop and think for a second. Don't get frustrated. Try to find an advantage in this. And I realized that everybody was in the convention hall or the seminar watching and listening to the people speak. Meanwhile, all of the exhibitors and the retailers were outside of there and no one was there. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to sacrifice by not getting the last, 40 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever of this thing. I'm just going to go and talk to the exhibitors. And so I ended up going up to each one of them and talking with them and having some really great one-on-one experiences. And I got some advice. I made some connections. I ended up speaking to this one woman. We were talking about, they had little baggies of candies that they were kind of handing out with the business card and everything. And long story short, I'm speaking with this woman about the candies and about how wonderful everything is. And the next thing I know, I say, "Oh, is this your booth? Is this your?" She says, "No, it's my husband." And she said, "Oh, here he is." And I turned around and this wall of a man, this gigantic man. I mean, he was just tall and just broad and everything. And he had a voice like this. I said, "Oh, hi." And I shook his hand and we spoke a little bit. And he asked me about my demo and where I was at in my profession. And anyway, fast forward to the next day, the next evening, when they had, basically it's like the Academy Awards for voiceovers. I paid extra to go to the awards ceremony. I wore a suit and a tie, and
Oh, that's so cool.
and it was this red carpet event, and walked the carpet and everything. And like, I am nowhere near where these people are at in their careers, but I thought, why not? It was an extra.
And did you know these people? I mean, you could recognize who they were. Just they're in that microcosm.
Oh, some of them, yeah. I mean, there were a couple of people who were like, titans of the industry, and Ving Rhames was going to get the Lifetime Achievement Award. He couldn't make it, unfortunately, but because Ving Rhames with that beautiful voice of his, and
Yeah.
There were some other people, there's Jim Cummings, who does the voice of Winnie the Pooh and Darkwing Duck and everything you can think of. He was there at the seminars and everything. But anyway, but the point is that fast forward, a day and a half later, I'm sitting in there, watching this whole thing unfold. And the gentleman who I met, the wall of a man, swept the awards.
Really?
Oh my gosh. He must have walked away with the awards in a frickin' wheelbarrow. I mean, he was up for so many and he won so many of them. And it was
Wow.
just funny that I met this guy. And then there was another, there's a company that does audiobooks. And I had really kind of been sheepish about getting into it. And it's something I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I need to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row. I don't want to be unprofessional. And I spoke with a woman there. And she started to talk to me and she said, okay, she said, here's what you need to do. And she started to really give me this wonderful pep talk. And she really hammered home the one thing that I would go back in time and tell my younger self is perfection is the enemy of the good. That if you're so worried about not making a mistake, you're never going to get anything done.
So you think you overthink it, or you used to overthink it a lot more?
I used to, and I still do, but I'm better than I used to be. And I think if you can say that, then you're doing something right.
Well, I'd like
making progress.
Well, first of all, this entire session has just been such a treat for me because I just don't get access to this kind of insight about things. And it's so incredible. You've been so incredibly generous with your time to do this.
I mean, you asked all the right questions. This is great.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. And so that it's about that whole thing of taking notes, right, and feedback. And it's weird because I'm not a person who gets very nervous or anything like that in front of crowds. I've never had a problem. I'm a pretty good speaker, if I may be so bold. And when it comes to on stage speaking at or lecturing or conferences, or I'm talking about artificial intelligence or medicine and technology or whatever it is, or with patients, I'm really good at that. But this is new to me, this podcasting thing, and it's weird to hear my voice in this way because I'm usually the one talking. So what advice would you have for me? How could I improve?
In what way?
Just to be better as a host.
Oh gosh. I would say you're already doing. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. I'm just saying that everything you're doing, I think, is great. Hold on. I think don't forget how interested and excited you are to learn more about what's going on. Because, it's funny, I mentioned Johnny Carson earlier, and I'm going to make it briefly about myself. When I was little, the first thing I wanted to be was a fire engine. I wanted to be big and red and loud. But after that, I wanted to be Johnny Carson. I wanted to be a talk show host. And I held on to that for a long time. And there's still a little part of me that kind of wants to do something like that. It's very easy to make fun of Larry King, because Larry King kind of plays a parody of himself. And I don't know if you're aware, but Larry King never does research on any of his guests.
Yeah, I am. I actually have his book.
Okay.
I think
yeah. It's a great one. But he's onto something in some respect, in that if you are curious and you want to know more, then anybody listening to you is going to feel the same. And so I think as long as you retain being open to seeing where things go, which this has been, this has been fantastic. This has been natural. This is like, sitting down and catching up with a friend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We should do this more often. I mean, there's a whole nother podcast just from our Australia trip, because I remember so many times you getting mad at me there. I remember one time in particular that just does that story. You don't talk about storytelling. That story deserves to be told. If you want to see Dooney mad, my goodness. Do you remember the time I poured you don't remember this, do you?
I don't know. Tell me.
Okay. We're in the Outback. It was, I think, just about 6 p.m. or so. We'd just come back from seeing Ayers Rock. There was a group of a cadre of all of our friends. We were just delighted, and we're now pitching tents. And I think, actually, let's be honest, we weren't the ones pitching them. I think the people we paid to take us on that trip out there were doing all the work, and we were
glamping.
Yeah, we were glamping, and it was amazing. It was a great. It was such a great time, and a real treat to be there. Someone had convinced me to eat that kangaroo tail, and I didn't know they were actually playing a joke on me, and I actually tried. It was horrible. Do you remember that? And the next morning,
it was abysmal.
It was horrible. Yeah, why would you? Yeah,
gamey as hell.
Yeah, and then so the next morning we were trying to get rid of all the trash. Right? You don't remember this, do you? And There were like ants all over the outback, as there are ants actually everywhere in everyone's lawn, but just they're very
their
noticeable and very big and looked very mean.
Yeah.
And so I had a bag of sugar, like granulated sugar, and you were like, okay, you're not going to throw that out, are you? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm just going to pour it out here. And you're like, but it's not natural. But I'm like, how much more natural could it be? It's sugar. I was like literally ready to take a piece of paper and draw out the chemistry. And you're like, you better not. And you were standing about a foot away from me, and you had this look on your face like you had better not. Like you were just like, don't you dare. And I was like slowly unzipping the thing. You don't remember this. And you're like, it's not natural. You're contaminating this beautiful landscape that doesn't even belong to us. And I just go, and the look, and you were just like, you heathen. I mean, you I was cracking up, but you were really angry. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, do you realize this sugar is going to be gone in 30 seconds by 9,000-legged insects that are going to come and consume it? But I just thought it was funny. It's one of these things that stands out to me.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. The only thing I can think of, there's two factors that may play into this. I mean, obviously, you're right. It was.
Oh no, who knows? It doesn't matter. I mean, I could.
No.
Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No. But here's where I'm coming from. There were two things going on in that time. One, I don't know if you remember, I'd thrown my back out.
Yeah.
And I had, thank God, one of the guys there had done lots of physical therapy and was studying that himself, and he was able to help me get into a position and do stuff because, yeah, I had basically thrown my back out coughing or sneezing or something.
Yeah, because I know exactly why you did, because you coughed really hard because you almost died on that macadamia nut or something.
Yeah, well, that was when we went to Great Keppel Island.
Oh, okay.
So that's a different thing. Yeah, I almost died basically because of a hazelnut.
Hazelnut.
It was a hazelnut, yeah. But the other thing that happened was, if you recall,
what a tombstone.
Trip.
Died by hazelnut. Okay.
Yeah, everybody leaves little jars of Nutella by my tombstone. Just thinking about Charles. No, the other thing that happened was, during that trip, we were given the opportunity to climb Ayers Rock.
That's right.
Or not.
Right.
And I would say 95% of the people on that trip decided to climb. And there was about 5% of the people who chose not to. There was that older husband and wife.
That's right.
Older. They're probably our age now, but they seemed older. And they were adamant that they weren't going to do it because it was not appropriate.
Yeah.
And I was on the fence. And I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to actually climb this sacred place for, the Kuri, the native people.
Yeah.
And eventually I decided to climb it. But as I did it, I ended up taking about 4 rolls of film all the way up and all the way back. I documented the whole thing because we had been told that later that year, it ended up being a couple years later. Since then, nobody climbs it. It is closed to the public. It is a sacred place for the Uluru, and their elders, their people that they designate are the only people who can climb that. So I thought, well, I'm documenting it.
Yeah, might as well.
So I was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm glad I did, and I still have all those photos. I think I was feeling particularly guilty about my choice because, as you said, we're breaking up camp and we're heading home, and I probably was projecting because I had felt a bit of shame over my decision, and that's probably why I was so rough on you.
Oh no, you weren't rough. I just thought it was funny. I'll tell you why I climbed it. You want to know why I climbed it?
Oh no, I was only rough because of the sugar. That's
no, I know. No, I know. I'm saying. You know why I climbed it though? Because the day before, Paul and I got into the largest aviation accident in Alice Springs history. Remember? I mean, we crashed in a hot air balloon full of Japanese screaming tourists with a pilot whose first name was Scooter. Remember that? I just remember.
I remember. I was in the chase vehicle, and it was a coin flip. It would have been me and you. Paul won the coin flip because there was the one right at dawn.
Yeah.
And there was the one after the sun had risen. And we all wanted to be at the one at dawn. And you had set everything up. So you got yours of the 2 slots left for the 3 of us. You got the first one. And then it was between me and Paul. Coin flip, I lost.
I have a picture that is, I would say, 7 seconds before the crash, and it is one of the most beautifully framed, incredible pictures. And I'll send it to you.
Showing, yeah, please do, and I'll show you the ones that I took.
And then
I actually took one of them framed.
Because I'd love to see that, by the way. But I remember just taking that picture, and it wasn't digital camera, so I couldn't see on a screen like what it was.
It was prohibitive. 19 digital cameras were prohibitively expensive. And
Phil had like the only one. Remember that 2 megapixel thing, which I still have the pictures from, by the way. I'll send you a picture of you. I was just looking at it, doing some research and seeing what I had. But in any case, so we're at the leading edge in a wicker basket. Just rule number, Ravi's rule number 420, never fly in anything that's made of wicker. Or just general, nothing from Pier 1 imports should have anything to do with aviation. And that's coming from a pilot, right? So it's like, so I'm in this wicker basket and I'm looking to the side, and Scooter, the balloon pilot, is just he just starts having a seizure. And I'm like, huh? I look over.
Wait, like literally?
No, but he's just frantic. He's just frantic. And now all of a sudden, like, handles and things. It's like the scene from Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. When they detach from the dirigible and they're trying to escape the Nazi planes. He's like, "Dad, get on the gun! It's right there, 10 o'clock." And he's like, "What are you talking about, Dad? It's only 9." And it's like, "No, 10, 9, 8." And it was just frantic like that. And I'm like, "What is he doing?" And now he looks worried. And then we start going down, right? So we're descending because I'm looking at the altimeter, right? And at that point, I'd flown a plane with a friend, but I was like one of these dorky sim flight guys, right? Like had the little setup and this in the house growing up. So I would play Microsoft Flight, so I knew all the instruments and all that stuff, like all the physics of it. So then he goes, "All right, everybody, hang on, we're going down." And then Paul, who our friend Paul is a 6'4", he's a very tall, very stoic guy, right? Paul doesn't say much.
Well, and you're little flower yourself. You're
it's a very elegant way to say it. But so we're sitting there, and I just remember looking at Paul after I put the camera away, and I was like, "We're going down quick. Like this doesn't seem like it is in the movies." And Paul, I look over like Paul, and Paul looks over at me, and we started going down into the wicker cubbyhole like this and just hanging on. And I don't know what it looked like from you, from the chase vehicle, but that was hilariously. I mean, I'm glad no one got seriously hurt, but
right. Let me give you the other side, the other perspective.
Please do.
I remember this distinctly. We're in the chase vehicle, which is this white panel van, and we are trying to go where you guys are going, and I can hear the guy who's driving, who's the other, what was his name? What was the guy's name?
Scooter.
So Scooter's, number 2. Scooter is trying to drive through these equivalent to like dirt paths,
right.
In the desert. You could probably run about, big circles 200 meters around, and you could be one of the first people to ever set foot, in that area in 100 years, if ever. We're so remote anyway. And so he's trying to struggle to find a way to get to where you guys are at. And so he actually turns away from the balloon to find a road to turn to get to where you guys are at, because there was some like a line of scrub brush or something, and there was no road to get there. So he was going to have to kind of circumnavigate and go around. I turn and look out the back, and I see the balloon going down. The time he got the car turned around and was looking again, I see the balloon down again. Now, this wasn't a glitch in the matrix. You guys had fucking bounced.
We bounced.
You came down.
We bounced 7 times.
7?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
so
and we went
somewhere
through...
it was either between 1 and 2 or between 4 and 3. I saw the balloon go down again. I remember looking and going like, wait, I already saw this. And you guys were mid-bounce. Well,
it's you're in a wicker basket with no cushioning, no landing gear, right? It's a box. But the other thing you have to remember, though, is there's a full-on furnace next to you, right? It's full of fuel, and so it's like this whole thing is just a bad idea, right? I mean, I have not stepped foot, and I will never go into a balloon again. And I have flown lots of planes. I am checked out in many types of aircraft. I have a couple hours in helicopters, and I feel very comfortable in flying airplanes, being passengers, but oh my gosh, no, that was so. I'm glad you lucked out. I mean, I'm glad you didn't get hurt. I'm glad we didn't get hurt. They refunded our money, but so the next day when they were like, "Do you want to climb Mayor's Rock?" I'm like, "Yeah, hell yeah, I'm trying to freaking do everything. Life's short, babe. Like I'm gonna climb the damn rock."
Wow, I did not realize that was.
Or maybe that was that day. That was the dawn thing. But I do have one last question for you because I know you well enough to know one of your favorite fictional characters. And given that your voiceover work and the person who plays that character pretty well, in my opinion, the Joker, Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Yay or nay?
Yay or nay?
Yay or nay?
Oh, it's not even a question. He embodies it. Here's the thing. Not only has Mark Hamill embodied it from, the Bruce Timm Batman the Animated Series that came out in the early 90s, subsequently gone on to voice it in that series, in the Arkham video game series, partly because another actor took a point, but also Justice League Unlimited, the sort of more children-friendly DC Ends show, and also some videos that were a lot dark. They did do the cinematic release of the Killing Joke, the titular Alan Moore story for the Joker. So he's not only played the Joker, but he's played 5, maybe more subtle variances Joker. And he's done them differently. And he's not on the DC. I think it's DC Kids. I'm not sure if that's but he also does the voice of Swamp Thing. The Trickster, I think it is one of the Flash villains, as well as the Joker. And there's a really fun where the Joker and the Trickster kidnap famous actor Mark to ransom him for money in little animated short. And so he's getting to flex his muscles, and of course, Swamp Thing shows up. So he's doing 4 voices simultaneously in this thing. But okay. I mean, yay or nay, there's no question.
I just wanted to hear it from you because you're the expert. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just a weird fanboy thing from my side.
No, not at all.
Well, Dunes, listen, we got to do this again and catch up. And listen, where can people find you? I mean, how do they get a hold of you, either for work or just to see what you've done? Or are you on social media, or do you have a website?
A website. I try to keep social media just to friends. I don't have a public persona social media website, but just a straight website. The name of the website, once I get it up and running, hopefully later this month, is voicecharles.com.
Wait, say that one more time. Your website is
voiceofcharles.com.
Got it. Voiceofcharles.com.
Not anything up there currently. I'm working on it. This is kind of the first foray for me into developing a website, so I'm learning. To examples of my work, not only the voiceover but the storytelling. So yeah.
Awesome.